Okay, first of all, thank you. I really appreciate this. I love teaching in my old age. Teaching is my creative outlet and keeps me alive, it keeps my brain going because you guys are always smarter than I am, especially at my age, so I use you guys to keep me going. So, I don't know, have you read anything of my background? You know that I've been a street fighter and a gang banger and stuff like that in my life? You read? You didn't read my bio, okay. Do they need to know a little about me or not? Philip?
If you could, yes, they actually have your bio, but if you want to give them, give some of the highlights. Is there an airplane flying over? Is there an airplane flying over? It sounded like an airplane was flying over.
Yeah, I know.
Is that what it was?
I'll get started since would you alert me about 10 minutes before we're done? Because I want to go to the last part. I want to talk about some personal stuff about what you guys will face when you go out into the world, no matter what kind of job you go to as far as communications.
Certainly.
Okay, so crisis management, you've already heard from Chris Jones, who I think covered a presentation we did on crisis communications and a crisis training thing. And then when you talk about crisis management, I teach in the Rice MBA program, and I do 21 hours of crisis that I'm going to try to get into 40 minutes. So we're putting 20 pounds in a half-pound bag here, trying to anyways. So I really want to just give you an overview of crisis management, how it might affect you as you leave school, go out into your career. I understand this is, you guys are getting a media degree, you could go into advertising, you could go into PR. There's so many things with your degree that you can go into, especially if you're a good communicator. If you're a good writer and you're analytical, you're going to be able to do a lot of things beyond working, say, in a PR agency or working in a PR group. Anyways, on crisis management, you're going to deal with a crisis and you won't have a choice. You'll have personal crisis in your life. You'll have your organization will have a crisis, whether it's an agency, a company. You're watching crisis. If you're watching the news at all, you're seeing crisis with the president and other things going on in this world. So it's all over us. And so we just need to be aware of how, what does that entail and how do we handle it. First of all, I'm going to give you the basics. You had a handout. I did an article for the Houston Business Journal. I'm not going to go over that. That is a basic primer on crisis management. Talks about what's in a plan, what are the most important things to worry about, why you have it, that type of thing. So that'd be good as a reference for you. I give you a couple other handouts. I may go over one of them towards the end, which talks about tough stuff for crisis communicators. I'm going to give you the landscape of what we face today in crisis management, what's going on, give you some types of crisis, some examples. And then I'll end up maybe what you're going to face when you go out after you get your degree. So anyways, basically crisis. What is a crisis? It's an activity that can potentially have a very negative effect on either you or your organization. And what makes it a crisis is it's happening fairly quickly, and it's probably going to get out of control pretty quickly if you don't figure out what to do about it. And crisis management is way beyond crisis. Crisis communication is just one part of crisis management. So basically, this is the boring stuff, but what crisis management does, 5 main things. And the most important thing is first, it's prevent the crisis from happening. Now, how can we do that? Anybody have an idea? How can you prevent a crisis? Does anybody in the class have an idea?
Come on, guys.
Yes.
Shamika.
You can't necessarily prevent a crisis, but you can be prepared for it.
And I can't hear her. What did she say?
She says you can't necessarily wait, can you repeat that?
You can't prevent a crisis, but you can be prepared.
Now, she says you can't prevent a crisis, but you can be prepared for it. Does anybody agree with that? Or? Airplane coming over us. Skype connection? Okay.
No one hears it. We don't know what he's saying. But we can't tell what happened. We don't know. I get extra points for recording. That's the case, I'll keep my name. James? Oh, yeah. I don't know. Stop talking. I can't hear you. You're trying to read.
Did you hear?
We can now. Yeah, we had the airplane sound for a second there.
Oh, wait, there you go.
Okay, yeah. Sounds good now.
Whatever you're moving was causing that sound. Whatever. Okay. Okay, so I really didn't hear what she said, but I'll just go on. How do you prevent the crisis? The most important thing when we do a plan is to figure out what an organization is vulnerable for. You need to know the vulnerabilities of an organization or yourself. And what we do when we go in and start with an organization, we have a meeting with all the top people. It's usually a day-long meeting where we discuss every possible thing that could go wrong, from an HR problem to an operational problem to just a product recall problem. So knowing your vulnerabilities is the most important thing in crisis management, because if you know what you're vulnerable for, you will take action, and management should take action to address those problems. Okay, if you have, again, if you have an HR problem with harassment or discrimination, there's ways you can fix that, and you need to fix that and have policies and procedures in place that prevent those kind of things from happening. Okay, so first one is preventing. If the crisis happens, the number two thing in crisis management is our job is to minimize it. How do we minimize the crisis? By having quick reaction, by putting the right team in place to handle it, and having a plan, process, and procedures already in place to handle it quickly. You don't go home and come back the next day when a crisis hits. Okay, the third main part of crisis management, once it's going on and it's happening, is how you gain control of it. Again, you gain control by being on top of it with the right people 24/7. You can't walk away from a crisis, because as you know, the news cycle is 24 hours worldwide. So you've got to stay on top of it and be out there, and you can be out there saying, we'll talk about what you should say and when you should say it later, but that's the kind of things you can do to gain control. The fourth part of crisis management, so many companies don't do this, is fix the darn problem. You got recalls of cars. GM has a terrible recall going on now. People have died because they didn't do the right thing, and I'll talk about that a little later. So fixing the problem with an oil refinery or a pipeline spill, it costs a lot of money, and they need to fix the problem so it doesn't happen again. Okay, take advantage of positives is the fifth part of crisis management, and that's the toughest part. If you handle a crisis right, like Toyota when they had their recall, I worked on that. We talked to their dealers. We put things in place to deal with their customers. They called everybody that owned a Toyota, and they handled it correctly. And let me turn off my phone. Hold on. Sorry. Anyway, they handled it correctly by getting to their customers and their consumers. They never. If somebody called a Toyota dealer, the phone never went to voicemail. A live person talked to them. They handled everything perfectly. A year later, after that big recall and all the negative publicities, their sales were up unbelievably. And that's happened with many companies, especially products that have handled the crisis correctly. Okay. Okay, the types of crisis you deal with. The first one is advance notice. You know it's coming. Your company's going to lay off 2,000 people. You're going to close a major facility. You know about that in a lot of it in advance. But you still have to work on it. You have to still understand it's coming. You need to be prepared for it, because when it hits, it will be a crisis, even though people know kind of in advance it's coming. The other type is an obvious one, the exploding crisis. You know, the rig blows up in the Gulf of Mexico. That's exploding. Your CEO gets indicted. That's exploding. Fire. 60 Minutes shows up at your front door. That's an exploding crisis. And that's one we deal with. I have dealt with 60 Minutes many times. The third type of crisis is the ongoing crisis, where you have labor unions that continually are at odds with what you're trying to do. You have customer service, you have complaints. Ongoing right now, which is the most important one, the one I worry about the most, is cyber terrorism. What's going on out there? They're doing so many things to mess us up, whether they're stealing our money, our accounts, or there are major oil companies right now that are worried to death about cyber terrorism getting into their operations and their processes and procedures. Then there's the crisis that lasts forever. And I'm trying to think of one right now, because some of these, I mean, Bill Clinton will have whatever he did with that young lady, it'll be on his record forever. I'm not sure that's really affected him negatively in this point in time. Exxon, when they had the major ship spill in Alaska, that lasted for a long time. But there's one organization, a government organization, that's continually has a crisis and a perception and a negativity field. What organization, does anybody guess what that would be in the government that you guys don't like?
IRS.
The IRS, absolutely. And I have worked with the IRS many times on how they communicate, what they do, but they've got mega problems in addition to asking you for money. So that's kind of a crisis they work on all the time, their perception, their branding, and when they have a mistake, and they make a lot of mistakes, they are on it really quick and try to solve it. Okay. Okay, other types of crisis, there can be economic crisis, lose your job, political crises, criminal activity, unfortunately, rears its head in business these days. Personal crises, financial crisis, a competitor attacks you, competitors are trying to get your takeaway sales, accidents, natural disasters are huge with the hurricanes and things like that going on. A product crisis, a product recall. So those are a legal crisis where somebody is suing your company for big money. So those are the types of classifications. Basically, it's not a complete list, but it's kind of what we deal with all the time. The cyber terrorism I want to talk a little bit about, because you all need to be aware of that. You all need to be aware of how to protect yourself. Like, don't open attachments. I mean, be very careful of what you do. Just read a story where the White House was down in a few days because they had people inside their computers. And they're saying that government workers are the worst because they're online and they're clicking stuff and they're letting viruses come in. So we have to be especially cognizant of the cyber terrorism problem, and I hope we have the right people handling it. And the most valuable people that we hire to handle cyber terrorism are criminals, because they know how to do it, and either they've reformed or we've convinced them or we're paying them more money. But so you guys need to just be aware in your personal lives too of cyber terrorism. Over half of your energy companies tell me that cyber stuff can incapacitate their networks. It can affect their offshore rigs, their drilling. It can cause explosions, blowouts. So again, and mobile is even more dangerous. So those are the kind of things that we all need to think about going forward. Let me tell you something very important about crisis management. I don't care if you have plans, procedures, you know everything, you've been through 50 crises like I have. Every crisis is different. There's no one crisis I've ever had the same. I went through 3 refinery blowups and fires with deaths, but all 3 of them were caused by different things. They went different ways. There were different people involved. So no matter what it is, crisis management, there's never going to be one the same. Okay, so today's landscape. I study companies at Rice. I look at 10 to 15 companies every year with my class, and we study the types of things they're vulnerable for. What could go wrong? And are they prepared? And what we find out is, sadly, probably over half companies are not prepared for a crisis. They think they are, but they're really not. They do a drill, they do a crisis plan, they put it in the back room on the shelf, and then they go on to other things. And then when it hits, they're really not prepared. Okay, and the other thing that's troubling, we found out that 70% of crisis issues today are caused by internal people, employees or bad management. And again, employees that don't report a problem because they're scared about ruining their career, or a manager doesn't want to go up the hill, and so they don't report a problem. There's criminal activity, unfortunately, with people. They're just trying to make a couple extra bucks and doing it the wrong way. If you look at the how many are familiar with the General Motors crisis, with the recall on the ignition switches? Anybody familiar with that? Okay, that's horrible. That's horrible. And there's a woman that is now, Mary Barra, is now in charge of GM. She was there during that whole process. So they went through and fired a bunch of people, did investigations. But it's coming out yesterday, for example, that they did know about these things happening. They did know people were killed, but they didn't do anything about it. I mean, I think that's horrendous. Now, are they going to get away with it? In my opinion, they will, because they're so huge. But they knew about it 2 months before they reported the problem, and then it was caused by managers at all levels letting something go, and it was wrong, and you know, it's a big crisis for them. And again, unfortunately today we have white collar crime. If your company's being investigated by the government, that's a crisis because of the communications that will come out of that. We talked about security breaches, accidents, hazardous materials, especially if you're in the industrial type of business. Hazardous material releases are huge these days. Natural disasters, again, when the hurricane came through Houston, when Ike came through Houston, it shut down Houston for 2.5 weeks. We had no power. You talk about a crisis. How did we operate during that period? Most executives I talk to claim they have plans and they have crisis plans, but only about 30% are confident they could respond efficiently if there was a crisis. So again, why am I talking about this? Because, you know, I would say only one or two of 5 companies are prepared. Most don't have qualified people to handle the crisis. They put together a crisis team, and who do they have that's available? They take 3rd and 4th stringers and put them on the team. Money companies just still don't understand what they're vulnerable for, what could happen to them. And again, it's loss of business, consumer confidence goes down, there's liability, there's increased scrutiny by the government, and a lot of issues just refuse to go away by virtue of the business you're in. So again, the main thing is understanding what we're vulnerable for. Is anybody here in the class going through a current crisis that you can talk about? Nobody's going through a current. Anybody aware of a crisis that's going on we ought to know about or are concerned about? Okay.
Oh, come on, everybody's in a crisis at some point or another.
What's that?
I get crises at least twice a week from these folks. I mean, they're not admitting it right now.
Yeah, okay. Well, and again, when I find out, when you really talk to like a CEO of a major company, they tell me they go through 12 to 15 crises a day. Now, that could be something from an HR issue to security to a manufacturing problem to an accident to legislation in the government. So it's all over the board, but when you really drill down on it, they are faced with a lot of things every day that they have, and the key is they have to be smart enough to make a quick decision on how to handle it, and they have to be smart enough to get the right people to help them with the crisis. So again, Mary Barra with GM is going through hell right now with a crisis, and you know she's trying to handle it correctly. we have a big oil and gas company on the Ship Channel that is losing money, and it's a public company, but they're paying their CEO $142 million a year with bonuses. And the shareholders are raising heck, and he's getting away with it. I mean, that's a crisis. You know, I wouldn't buy that stock if I knew that. But first of all, they're not making money, and they're paying him a fortune. Look at the president. The president's going to the Middle East, the Ferguson, Missouri problem, the ISIS problem, and then the Republicans beat him up in the election. So he's got ongoing crisis going on. Okay, a little bit, I didn't talk about my background, but just so you know, I've been in this business a long time, and I used to be 7 foot tall, and I'm 5'6", so it's more than he's laughing, I can see right now. Okay. Okay, look at what's going on. Look at nonprofits. The Red Cross has had 7 different leaders in 8 years because of mess-ups in the Red Cross. Susan Komen, everybody loves that organization, but they've had big problems. Their donations are down 30% because of a stance they took on, I think, on abortion or whatever it was. And then they're still recovering from that. Nonprofits have a crisis because, for example, there's 1,100 nonprofits that do nothing but raise money for cancer research. So the crisis is they're competing with each other, and there's only a finite amount of money. For example, the Boston Marathon, when they had that problem, many of the Boston nonprofits are almost out of business now. Why? Because somebody started a nonprofit to benefit people that were affected by the explosion and the bombing. And all of a sudden the money is going to there and not going to the other nonprofits who are really great causes. But that's a crisis. In the communications business, I've handled 3 60-minute stories where the 60 Minutes was going to do a piece on whatever organization I was with at the time. And I'll tell you, in handling that crisis, I've always been a fan of talking to the media. Sometimes people just shut them out and won't talk to them. And we knew these were going to be negative stories, but we wanted to at least get our point of view on the show. And in all cases, we did get our point of view on the show, even though they were negative stories. And in 2 cases, they actually came out fairly positive. So they were crisis as a communicator I had to deal with. CBS Leslie Stahl or somebody calls me, and they want to do a story, and they're coming over right now to my office, and they want to do the story. That's a crisis. I have to figure out what to do. Do I cooperate? Do I not cooperate? I got to go talk to my bosses, explain it to them. They're going to be having heart attacks. So anyways, those are the types of things as a communicator that we do. Now those are national level, but we deal with them locally with local media all the time. I've handled a major university's dean that was going to get fired, and they wanted me to help that dean go through the whole situation, and we worked it out because we have egos involved with hiring people. I had to work with that dean, and we worked out where the dean would leave, and it wouldn't be a firing. It would be amenable. The person didn't want to leave, but the option was they could ruin their life. They were in their late 40s. They had a whole career against them. So I had to work with that person to do the communications to make it come out so that it was a win-win. It turned out that way. I've been involved on the media side with Tiger Woods and with Roger Clemens and that kind of stuff. So those are crises for those people. 2 presidents called me to handle sort of confidential issues they were having during their campaigns, where I had to move quickly, I had to do something, I had to contact people, I had to make the problem go away. So those are some of the things I've handled at a pretty high level. When I was with a major oil company for 17 years, I got to handle recalls, explosions, public affairs, lawsuits, layoffs, all that kind of stuff. So that was kind of the business as a communicator you have to handle. One of the things personally, if you go into this business, one of the things you'll have to deal with, and I deal with it all the time, is we work for people that don't understand what we do. They don't understand the media. They don't understand communications. They come to you and say, I want you to do a news release on something, and I want positive coverage in the newspaper. I mean, that's kind of their mentality. We work with all the time getting unreasonable demands from our clients, even in the agency business. Now, clients They want nothing but good news, and they want good stuff. That's a crisis for us, because we have to somehow explain to them that you can't necessarily do that. We will do the best we can, but we have to have a good story. It can't be baloney, and we can't control the media, although if we work with the media correctly over time, you can have some control of the media. Okay, let me see. Where are we on time here? How much time do we got?
About 10 minutes till 10 till. We got about 20 minutes in total.
5 minutes?
20.
Okay, let me just give you, again, through a competitor attack. I represented Corona Beer. Anybody ever drink a Corona? Anyways, Corona Beer was attacked by Budweiser. Budweiser was running ads, and they were showing a Corona in a Heineken bottle. You couldn't see the label, but the inference was these were stale beers, and Budweiser was a fresh beer. Well, what happened? Coronas and Heineken sales went down, right down the tubes. I got a call, we got to somehow turn this around. So we turned it around by going to the networks, getting them to cancel the ads, and because these two beer companies might have been out of business had we not reacted quickly, and it was a matter of knowing that these ads were not right, and the networks needed to stop running them. We got Budweiser to stop running their campaign about 4 weeks into their campaign, of their 12-week campaign, and then beers came out sort of okay. Had a crisis where the medical center here years ago got flooded during one of the storms. We had to work real quickly over a couple of days to handle that, how to handle communications on that. We get a lot of social, digital media, email tweets from mad employees that poison the well, and they go out to millions of people, thousands of people, and we deal with it all the time. Right now, we have systems now that for a client, we can monitor everything that's out there worldwide. So if somebody burps in Nigeria, we know it. And what we need to do is go through all that stuff every day, find out what's out there for our client, and is it bad? And if it's bad, we need to alert them to it, and then tell them what we need to do about it. So you cannot control the communications these days because of the digital social media world. Let me see. A lot of times we also get our client, if somebody be suing our client, and the lawyers will call and say, if you don't settle with us, we're going to go to the news media. We get that all the time. What do? In rare cases do they actually go to the media. Because if they go to the media, what have they done? They've blown their case. I mean, what else can they do bad to us? So we have to react very quickly when they threaten to go to the media. What do we do about it? Are we ready to go if the media does call us? What do we say? So we get that, not a lot, but we've had that happen. Let's see, okay. So the biggest issues today, in my view, are trust and credibility, that the public is having trouble trusting and businesses and the government having credibility. And that's a problem for us as communicators. We need to be helping our get their brand back, get their credibility back. The other biggest problem we have is people that do dumb things, do stupid things. And if we have a good company that has motivated, loyal employees, we're in much better shape than if we have employees that don't like us and do things. The other issue in a crisis, what's helpful sometimes in a crisis, when you have a big event happen, that all of a sudden something happens somewhere else in the world and your crisis disappears from the media. You hope for that. So sometimes we've gotten into crises and the audience goes to where the media is on their breaking news. So you just don't want to be their breaking news too many times. The other issue we have is that leadership in most companies and the government isn't really that attuned to how to handle crisis correctly. They're too emotional and they do too many knee-jerk reactions. Okay, any questions so far? Okay, if you want to, I gave you a handout on the tough stuff for crisis communicators. I want to talk about those a little bit. Again, this is for communicators. First one is what I said before. Every crisis is different. It takes different twists and turns. So you've got to be on top of things and aware of how things can change. The other thing is big for us. If your management doesn't have confidence in you, respect you, and if you don't have credibility, you're going to be an order taker. So we have to work very hard at credibility with our management. And we do that over time with the good job we do on everything. So if we do a good job and we do simple things for them fast and they're happy, and when you get to a crisis, hopefully they will listen to you as far as your advice. Again, understand the organization's vulnerabilities. Our job is to gather intelligence too. What's going on, what's happening during the crisis. Hopefully leading up to the crisis, you're able to get some intelligence that something could happen. The other one is a real tough one. When do we talk publicly? There's one group in crisis management that say we need to be transparent, we need to be first out there with the media, we need to be telling our story right away, and in most cases that's not true. Because in most crisis situations, we very seldom have the facts right away. Until you get the facts, you better be careful what you say. So you never admit you did something wrong, but you say, look, we're concerned that people have been harmed by this. We are investigating this. We're going to get to the bottom of it. You stop short of admitting that you caused the problem. So when to talk publicly is a very, very tough thing because there'll be a lot of pressure from the media. They want you right away. And if you don't talk, they're going to say, well, they must be guilty. So that's one of the toughest things we handle. The other thing we handle, if you're working for a company, is your boss and his management telling you the truth. Something goes wrong, they're looking, they're CYA, and they're trying to figure out how they can save themselves. And so, not in all cases, but you've got to really understand if they're telling you the truth. And if they're not, if you don't think they're telling you the truth, you need to say, look, I'm not going to do a media interview and be on record if this is not true or we're doing the wrong thing. So that's another tough thing for us. The other thing we need to do is play the devil's advocate. We need to take the other side and practice with our management. Here's what the other side is going to say. Here's what they're going to do. And advise them accordingly. The other thing is to stick to communications advice. Don't give them legal advice. Don't give them operations advice. Tell them what they should be doing communications-wise and how that can affect the perceptions of the public towards your organization. The other thing we need to know, and if we're competent, we need to know what other alternative communication strategies are there. Mass media is no longer where it's at. The social digital media, but there's certain things like called face-to-face communications, actually key meetings with key publics. So Google AdWords, there's all kinds of things that we need to have in our inventory that we can use during a crisis. The other thing I've done, anytime in a crisis, we're monitoring what's being said out there. If something is said that's inaccurate, we immediately try to correct it. I call it a truth squad. I put 2 or 3 people that do nothing but monitor what's being said. If there's something that's not true, we go right on there and refute it and say that it's not right. The last one is my thing about if you're going the wrong direction on any project you're doing, fail fast. Don't keep doing wrong. In this environment, you have to be able to change quickly and get to the right side or get to another strategy. So failing is not bad. It's bad if you keep going. But if you fail fast, turn around, people will understand that. Okay, the last thing about you personally, if you're working a crisis, you have to be the calmest person in the room. Because your calmness, if you're panicking, if you're going crazy, the other executives are going crazy too about what we're going to do about this. So as a crisis manager, you have to be the calmest person in the room. Okay, how much time we got?
How much time do we have?
10.
10:35 yet?
10 minutes.
You have 10 minutes.
Okay, yeah. We got 10 minutes. We're at 10:35 right now. You'd asked to stop you at 10:35.
Well, does anybody have any questions first? Is there anything I can cover or name?
Right here, Rachel or Kristen?
You can't see me, but I'll just talk. Okay, so
Speak loudly. Loudly.
I did a study over the Domino's crisis, whenever the management, they did like unsanitary acts, and they posted it on YouTube. And then the organization, they did a news release, but they didn't do a YouTube, response initially. So do you think that
repeat the question?
Yeah, sure. Terry, this is Kristen Conran.
Hi.
I'm getting her closer to the mic. She's kind of soft-spoken, so I'll bring her closer to the mic.
Okay, so I did a study over the Domino's crisis whenever the management did posted unsanitary acts on YouTube. And the organization Domino's, they reacted with a news release. But do you think that they should have initially reacted and did a YouTube response first? Because the management, like the people that did the acts, they posted on YouTube first. So do you think it's important?
No. You talking about the old one where they did something to a pizza?
Yes. Like,
Okay, oh yeah, that's a famous case, and I would argue that you gotta be careful reacting quickly. They took 3 days for 2 days for that president to do a YouTube answer to that. But they also didn't have all the facts. They didn't know whether these guys were doing it just for fun and really didn't do it, or really did they do it. So that's one of the things we deal with. You've got to look at that YouTube. You've got to make a decision one way or the other. What do we do? How do we communicate? And, you start by saying, if this happened, this is awful. We're investigating it. This isn't who we are. And we're going to get to the bottom of this as quick as we can. I mean, that's the only thing I can think of now. He did go on later, and they fired these guys, I think. They should have, even if they didn't do it, they should have fired them for what they did to the company. But that's a good example of where we don't have control of some of these crises. They're caused by people, and especially a lot of crises are caused by disgruntled ex-employees. We have it all the time. They go to the media. I have managers that say, how did the media find out about that? I said, because you just fired some person in that shop, and they went to the media with their story. And the media, of course, will never tell you who they got it from. So it's a big problem. I don't have an answer except that we need to be, it makes our job comfortable. It just makes it a 24/7 if you're in this business. You never know when that's going to happen. It doesn't happen between 8 and 5. It always happens at midnight or on the weekend. Okay.
Thank you. Appreciate
Good
it.
question. Good question. All right. Yasmin, would you mind coming up here so that Terry can see and hear you? Oh, we got the airplane again. Can you hear us? Yeah, we'll give it just a second. Say this is a connection problem. Is that what you said? Cyber terrorism? Here we go. Okay, can you hear?
Yeah, it's there, but okay, now it's not there.
Okay. Hi, my name's Melissa. You were talking about cyber terrorism, and you said the people that you usually use are criminals because they've been there and they've done it, and you pay them something. Just like it.
Yeah, go ahead, sorry.
Okay. Can you hear me? No.
I heard cyber terrorism, but I didn't hear anything else.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay. Okay. Okay. So you said cyber terrorism. The way you usually combat it, you would use criminals who have been involved in
Right.
cyber terrorism, and you would pay them. Is that an alternative for them not going to prison for the crime they committed by you using them to help solve a crisis case?
Well, ones I know about, and I'm being a little facetious, but I've been told this by a lot of IT, that's who has all the knowledge. There's been people that have been convicted, gone to prison. As part of their deal, they help out and they actually turn around and they make a lot of money helping companies combat what they were doing. I'm not sure how broad it is. I just know a lot of people talk about it. When we go look for somebody that's an expert in this stuff, you want to find somebody that knows how to do it and has done it. I guess that was it, whether it was criminal or not, So, I don't know how broad that is, so,
Thank you.
okay?
Another question? Oh, that thing's obnoxious.
You're
Very good. I'm
Can I,
sorry?
can I end up with a couple things?
Certainly, certainly.
Okay. I was just gonna talk about you guys' skills. This is basically, first of all, you have to be analytical. You have to figure out how to solve problems. You can't do that. You shouldn't be in this. You have to be a writer. If you're a good writer, and I have to work hard to be a good writer, but if you're a good writer, you will be analytical, and because we don't, everybody doesn't come to us when everything's wonderful. They come to us when they need help. They got a problem. You need to be well-read, have an awareness of what's going on around the world. You need to be able to work in teams. You need to have a collaborative attitude. That's where it is today. I talked about you need to be able to fail fast. If it's not going the right way, change it and go a different direction. You guys, especially us, need to deal with rejection. We will get rejected many times in our life with our ideas. We can't let that bother us. I think that's the biggest problem I see. People can't put up with rejection these days. Everybody's got to get all A's. Everybody gets a trophy for 8th place. We need to be able to, we come up with great ideas. The client won't accept all those ideas all the time. We need to live with it and go on and come up with better ideas. You need to understand whatever organization you're working for, you need to understand what business they're in. How do they make their money? How do they take? What can you do to help that company succeed? Not what PRSA or some of those are great organizations, but we really need to understand what the company's doing, and every communication we do fits in with that mission and objective of the company. And the other thing, I see people losing these days, and I work very hard on it in my other classes. You need to have good face-to-face communication skills. That still is a key. We still have to sell some of our ideas face-to-face, that type of thing. So, and you need, how many people in this class know how to work a room? You know how to work a room? Because I don't have time to go into that. But you need to go to a professional meeting, work the room, don't stand in the corner and talk to your friends. So anyways, Thomas, that's about all I can think of.
Okay.
If there's anything else you want me to say, I'll be happy to try.
There is one thing, as you know, it's very difficult to get speakers to come to Nacogdoches, and so it's been a privilege having you today talk about crisis communication. We appreciate it. We do have a tradition, though. Whenever we have a speaker up on the Skype, up on the screen, we like to get a picture with them. Would you mind hanging out for just a second to pose for a picture with the class?
Just sure.
Okay. All right. Come on up here, guys. Let's see.
Stop the slow.
Let me get a picture of everybody here. Hop on up there. Okay. All right. This is kind of goofy. Okay, all right. Is everybody ready? We're going to do a couple of them here. 1, 2, 3. And then we'll do one with the flash, but I'm worried that the flash might not work with the screen so well, but we'll give it a try anyway. Is that flash?
Yes.
All right, we'll get one more. And then just a little bit closer. A little bit back. And we should be good. All right, thank you so much for joining us, Terry.